Welcome to episode 10 of the Women Inspired Podcast. 10! Double digits! That's so awesome! Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is inspired to action, and that's my number one goal, to inspire you, my listeners, to take action in your lives. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's do it. Heather Shore is a fashion and trend veteran who discovered a passion for parenthood and a need to help support other breastfeeding and pumping moms by simplifying their dynamic lives. She returned to work after having a child and realized how sparse the clothing options were for breastfeeding and pumping moms. Rather than complain about it, Heather took action and she launched Nourish Collection, an on-trend clothing line designed especially for women who are breastfeeding or pumping. I'd like to welcome Heather to the show. Hey, Heather.
Hey, April. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I gave everybody a little bit of background about you, sort of the official bio, but tell us about yourself in your own words.
Sure. So I've been a designer since I was about 4 years old. I started making paper dolls and designing clothes for them that were missing from my grandmother and her friends. And that's kind of how I got into design or thinking about design. And I remember my mom just saying, well, that's a little impractical. You can't be a paper doll designer when you grow up. But you could actually make clothing. And I said, well, that sounds great. Sign me up for that at about 5. Okay, fine. So, fast forward years later, I went to school for it. I've studied it all my life. I have a particular interest in trend and costume history and just functionality in clothing. So I've been a designer, an apparel designer for a long time. Should I date myself? 18 years. And I worked for corporate primarily, designing women's wear. And when I had my daughter, and she's 5.5 now, I went back to work. And, the first experience I had going back to work after a relatively short maternity leave was just how logistically my life had changed and what those needs then were. Mm-hmm. So, completely different needs, no time. And that kind of led me to where I am today. And I'm sure we'll talk more in detail about that.
Absolutely. Well, I think we should just dive right into that because awesome. I think your career is super interesting to myself. So I had my daughter 11 months ago. So this is very fresh, and I can remember those days very, very well. But I think it's something that a lot of the listeners of this show would be very interested in. So tell me a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, well, so I started designing, I'll back up. So I was in the mother's room. I had just come from a meeting, running from a meeting, leaking through my dress. And it was a meeting that ran over by like 2 hours.
Oh, man.
As times, in corporate, where your time is theirs. But I had run in and just was already, emotionally, you're dealing with new hormones, you're dealing with missing your baby, and running into the mother's room, I had to physically take my dress completely off. And so you're sitting there vulnerable,
naked.
Really, because you're naked, essentially, in your clothes, strapped into this milking machine. And it just was like, can I just get one piece of help here that would make me feel more empowered or more like I had some control over something. So I looked immediately, because I had taken my cell phone with me into the mother's room every time. You have to catch up on work. I put pressure on myself to keep things moving that way.
Totally.
But I looked up nursing dresses and nursing tops. And I couldn't find any that weren't like a surplice or a pull down, something that looked professional and something that I could be, I was a designer. I needed to look the part and look like I knew what was going on with trend. And none of these tops or dresses that I found looked like an option. Let's just say that. They were really basic. So it just struck me. I said, the one thing that I can do here to help myself, and other moms must be going through this, is design something. I can do this. I have the trend background. I have background designing fashionable clothing. And P.S., I also am kind of a nerd when it comes to construction. So always the technical people, the technical designers were always my best friends because I nerd out about that stuff. So I started designing it back then right away, and I was still working for that company. So fast forward, and we left, we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we left there because my little one was little and we wanted to be near family. So we're from Minneapolis, and we came back up and, just have been chugging along on this thing and finding development. It took a long time to find fabric. I worked for another company in the interim, and then the company that I had left actually wanted to move us out to New York, which would then, of course, separate me from my family and my support system.
Right.
I said no. So, those things happen. And I think sometimes those things happen to provide an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And this certainly. So that's the long story.
Nice. So your business is called Nourish Collection, is that correct?
Yep, Nourish Collection. We're primarily online right now because we launched about 3 months ago.
Exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a labor of love, and just the people I've met in this last year and a half have been like life-changing. It's been pretty amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
We talk but wow, yeah, it is. Just how, if you're opening yourself, how much comes to you. Yep. If you're giving of yourself, if you want to include people, if you want to tell them your dreams, how quickly that comes back to you. It's pretty life affirming, I think.
Totally. And when you set, I launching, we were talking a little bit before the official interview, obviously, and launching this podcast, I felt very similar where, I'm just going to set this really crazy goal and I don't actually know quite what I'm doing and it feels really big, but it's funny when you set something big like that what you have to do in order to take each next step involves reaching out to people and doing things that you wouldn't normally have done and people you wouldn't normally have met, and it's so cool along the way.
Well, it's getting you out of your comfort zone and being comfortable with that, and then being able to embrace that. Because if I step out of my comfort zone, there's those nervous butterflies and those, can I do it? Am I crazy for thinking this? And not only is there validation out there, but there's also things that inspire you that you had no idea about. I'm thinking about the nonprofits specifically that I'm working with, and I didn't know they existed, and they're doing incredible work. And
you're working with what nonprofit?
So I'm kind of working with 4 of them, but one primarily. We're working with a nonprofit called Everyday Miracles, and they're located in Northeast Minneapolis. And what they do is provide moms access to doulas, and it's really important work. So both prenatal and postnatal care, they do things like subsidize car seats, do breastfeeding classes, which is how I found them, and just any kind of support that a postnatal and a prenatal doula would do. It's just a phenomenal organization. And, they were subsidized by the state up until this year, and they lost some funding. So it's just that constant, like, how do we get some traction back because this is a service for moms of need that is really benefiting, the beginning of these kids' lives.
Yeah,
it's important for the moms too. Really important.
Huge, absolutely huge. That's
So
amazing.
they're incredible at Everyday Miracles, and so we also work with Emerge Mothers Academy, which is out of Chicago. Not Chicago City, off of Chicago in Minneapolis.
Got you.
Chicago and Franklin, I think, is the cross street. They're out of Hope Academy, and they help moms get ready to go back into the workforce. So we've been able to work with them to provide clothing for moms who may be nursing and going back into the workforce. We work with Jeremiah program, and that's a big institution here. They have facilities here and in Boston and in Dallas or Austin. I'm sorry, I don't know precisely. But they're actually an all-inclusive nonprofit that actually houses moms while they get an education.
Wow.
So it's moms and kids. They provide education. So they literally on site where they have living quarters, they have also schools, and they're really good schools.
Wow.
And they have, I think, 5 campuses across the United States. I mean, just phenomenal work.
That's so cool.
And then Babies Need Boxes, which is the 4th one. And they just started about a year and a half ago. They just got an amazing grant that is going to allow them to provide boxes. It's kind of on this model of the Finnish boxes that every baby in Finland gets. Just kind of as an economic equalizer. That provide a safe place for the baby to sleep if they don't have a crib, and all of the kind of necessities for babies. So Danielle Selassie is the founder here, and she had read something about the Finnish practice of doing this. She said, "Why don't we have it here?" So the grant that they just got will provide every mom in the Twin Cities with a box.
That's so cool.
Who has a newborn. So it's very cool. There's a lot happening. So just, starting Nourish, I'm learning about all of this stuff.
That's amazing. So I want to go back to when you very first started, because sometimes it's easy to look at somebody when they've hit a milestone, like you've launched, you have, this online presence, your business is going. It's easy to look at somebody at that stage and say, oh, yeah, but, look where she is. You don't really think about the fact that you were once at the very beginning, like standing at the foot of the mountain, looking like, holy cow. So take us back to the beginning of your business. And in particular, I'm curious about what your background was and how you got it off the ground, given that. Did you have entrepreneurial background? Did you know what you were doing in terms of technical skills? I can't imagine all the moving pieces. And so maybe you knew some of them, but other pieces not. So I want to hear that story.
Essentially, yes. So, I definitely knew some pieces, and some of them I did not. So I think, the development of the product itself happened over the course of years and with a couple of extra hands. So as I was kind of thinking through my designs, which 3 of them are have patents pending, that's a whole other kind of part to starting this. But the product itself took some time. It took some time and some dedication, and that is all information, or that's all knowledge that I had. Because again, I'm a designer and I'm kind of a nerd about technical design, so I love that piece of it. So doing that is something that came naturally to me, developing the product itself. After that, of course, my background includes, I've been a buyer, I've been a planner, I've had sourcing as part of my background. So, and I did that intentionally early in my career because I thought it was really important I loved design. I knew I could do it, but I didn't know the business end of it. And I knew that I wanted to do something kind of unfettered. So I knew that I had to understand at some point the business end of it. And I'm really grateful that, I had kind of stumbled upon that idea early on in my career. So I was able to kind of think things through in terms of, okay, to realistically plan this, what do the numbers look like? Who do I need to, sit down with to make this a viable plan? I had connections in my industry, and that helps a lot. If I didn't have those connections, it would not have happened. To go out and just start something without having a background in it. And that's why I encourage people, if they're at the beginning of their careers, to learn on someone else's dime. Learn the protocols, learn the best practices at other companies, because there are things that you won't learn unless you do that.
Totally.
And you won't have that kind of foundation. Now, that said, we're in a very different time now that we can be really creative and we have to break out of these things. But to have some kind of foundational stability in terms of building a business, I have found that incredibly helpful. So I not only had kind of a base knowledge of business, but I also sought out people and knew who to ask about what, fill in those blanks, because there are going to be, I think for any business, there are going to be your core competencies, the things that you're really good at, and then you're going to have to fill those in with other people. We can't do this alone. Thank goodness, right? We all need each other, right? So learning, what I did early on was I tried to learn other people's jobs in terms of what they did, what they were focusing on, what they wanted to contribute to, because I knew that this wheel only worked with other people involved, So I put together a business plan, and I was helped along with that. Because there were elements that I hadn't thought through that you need to think through, particularly marketing. That's a big one. Because it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not out there, then you're not going to survive.
Totally.
And then partnering with the right people. So identifying some core people that I've worked with in the past that I could say, and I did reach out to them and said, how can you help me do this? Are you free to do this? Are you interested in it? I'd love to do, and having kind of a clear vision of what you want. It's one thing to go in and say, well, I kind of have this idea, and people aren't going to jump on that. But if you say, look, this is my goal, this is how I plan to do it, I don't know if I can do it that way. You have the expertise. Will you join me? Even in this first phase, right? If you have a clear plan, even if it doesn't happen that way, it's helpful to get people on board.
That's a great tip. That makes a ton of sense.
That's what worked for me. And then it's a matter of remaining open. Because the best laid plans, you're like, oh, well, yeah, okay, well, that theoretically could have worked, but it's going to work this way. And some things work great, and they work just like you plan them. But you never know which ones those are.
Absolutely. You speak very confidently about those early days. Did you ever doubt yourself?
Sure, but not my intentions. I never doubted my intentions. I never doubted that I should be doing something with what I knew, I guess. But sure, yeah. I mean, I feel like we all phone it in at some point, like we're all kind of just figuring things out. But I think maybe part of that confidence is just like I know that I don't know everything. And that's okay. And being okay with not knowing everything, right? I think if you're open to learn from people that you work with, people that work for you, you can be confident because you don't have to know everything. If you can admit that you're not, you can't function alone, I think it gives you confidence.
That's a really great point, because sometimes I think we we feel like it does have to be 100% us. I do have to know everything about every topic.
Right.
And whether it's a person who's in an entrepreneurial sort of career or someone who's working in a more typical corporate environment, it's really hard and you feel very vulnerable when you have to say, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how to do this. Or even worse, I tried it and some things worked and other things didn't, and I learned from it.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting about, we talk about the millennial generation. I think one of the things that this generation has taught me is that not only is it okay to not know everything, but it's detrimental to think you know everything, I think, and to put that expectation on yourself. As moms, we already know a lot. Let's face it. We know a lot, and we know how to handle a lot and manage a lot.
True.
But we don't have to know everything. And thank goodness, because life wouldn't be as fun. It's not fun to know everything, right? You can ask and make learning interesting. And with regard to operating a business, you have to be pretty confident that you know most of it. But if you're not flexible, you're not going to make it. And that's just what I've seen. I know a lot of small businesses and large businesses that if they're not flexible, if they can't pivot, they're not going to make it, especially in this environment.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, the degree to which business and technology has just completely changed the game is just wild. And it's not going to slow down, and it's not going to, go back to the way that it was. So I think we all just need to adapt. And what I like about what you said about being flexible is if you throw flexibility on top with the willingness to learn, it just makes you so much more effective in whatever it is, whatever career it is that you find yourself in. So I've worked with people who are on both ends of that continuum where they're committed to learning over their lifetime, and they're always excited for the newest tool or newest challenge because it involves getting to be a little uncomfortable and learning something new. And it seems like those folks are the ones who, are the ones who end up growing and doing so much better versus other people that I've worked with who have been much more rigid and less inclined to learn something new. Industry and your job and your career area, it's going to continue to advance without you if you're not willing to do the work. So it's going to happen one way or the other.
It's inevitable. There is that inevitability to change. And if you're not, if you can't be adaptable to it, and frankly, it's fun. It could be terrifying. Sure. It's not that I think that risk taking is fun necessarily, but, it's part of, I think that if you take it as, a learning, then learning is fun. And it's never wrong, right? Learning isn't wrong. So if you're learning, you don't have to say, it's the difference between knowing, thinking that you know everything and saying, well, we tested it and this is what we found out. What we found out isn't wrong. So whether I had an assumption about it or not, this is what we found out. And that's always going to help you.
Totally agree. So you had mentioned that there are things that you knew how to do and pieces that you didn't. What was something as you were building this business and getting to this point that you really had no idea how to do? Like, what was the area that you felt like you had the least experience? And then how did you find people to help you, or how did you navigate it?
I think one of the big things has been marketing and social media for me. I feel comfortable knowing how to build a brand, but marketing is a different kind of thing altogether, and it's changing quickly. So it's one thing to try to learn about it. It's another thing to keep up with it. So I think the people that I sought out to help and continue to seek out are people that are really paying attention to how people consume information, what is inspiring to them, where they find the information. It's a whole new kind of game. I don't want to call it a game, but it's a whole new thing when you're looking at how social media and internet accessibility plays into marketing versus this old kind of, only print media and only door-to-door type stuff. So that's been really interesting and challenging. It's been creatively challenging.
How have you dealt with it?
Still dealing with it.
How are you dealing with
only
it?
Only been 3 months. So I have a person that I work with who does my social media, and she is fantastic. She is a breastfeeding mom. She is a leader in a local support network for breastfeeding moms. So she knows, she has a lot of information specific to how we can help support our market, really. She didn't have a specific specialty in social media, but I think that if you have a helpful message, you can figure the other stuff out. So she helps me with that. And from also, we're trying to partner with some similar brands and really because at this point, I think one of the great things about having local small businesses is that we can pool our resources.
Totally.
And it makes it more of a community effort. So that in itself has brought me some amazing relationships in this short amount of time.
Totally.
So I would say community, interaction, and then just really kind of embracing some of these other vehicles. Like we're going to be on Amazon relatively soon. That's probably going to change our business model a little bit. So then with regard to marketing, they'll be able to do some of the marketing for us. But we still need to, I think what's important to me with regard to that marketing specifically is that we convey what we stand for as a brand. Be visually appealing, be visually beautiful, but also stand for something. And so I hope that that's conveyed. I think we have some work to do to convey that a little bit further.
Yeah. How do you describe that? What your brand stands for?
I founded Nourish Collection based on the want to help other moms like me. And I'm very seriously, because it's really hard. And I was advantaged. I was privileged in that, I worked for a corporation that had a mother's room. I was paid well, and it was still really hard. So considering, what moms are facing today, just logistically, emotionally, I hope that our brand is a support in that and an encouragement, and really physically a help with the clothes. Because I think that if I had clothes that I could just not even think about, I could throw them on in the morning, leave, feel put together. That would have helped me emotionally a lot.
Totally.
And it does. And it does. So, and that's something that I've heard from moms.
I was digging around your website. I love that. I have about 5 directions I want to go right now, but I was digging around. I'll start in one place and we'll go to another one. I was digging around your website prior to us talking, and I came across, and I don't remember what the name of the item is called, but it's like this structured fitted dress. And I looked at it and I'm like, how in the heck do you breastfeed or pump in that thing? Because it is gorgeous. And it's so neat that you've really thought about the people who you are, trying to impact with your business. And it truly is. I looked at that like, that is a cute dress aside from even breastfeeding and pumping and all of that. And it's amazing that it actually would function.
Thank you. That's really that was my design approach. It has to be a great piece, period.
Yes.
And by the way, you can breastfeed in it. So it had to be a piece that, one, you couldn't really tell. You would want to buy it anyway. And by the way, it's going to make your life easier.
Totally.
And that's really the point of the styles.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I'm glad you said that. Great.
And the other direction I wanted to go, and it goes back to something you said earlier about how you were always confident in what you were trying to do. I think it sounds like you really have the why behind what you're doing. It sounds like you really have that down. And it sounds like you've picked something that is just, it's naturally something that you want to help with. It's something that you feel very passionate about. And I think that helps in so many ways. You know, I think about the challenges of putting this podcast together, and I just wanted a forum where women could talk about these amazing things they were doing without having to be meek and apologize or downplay them or whatever. I want people to come on here and be like, no, I did this awesome thing. I launched this awesome business and I'm helping people in this way. No apologies. And so it sounds like you really have your why down and you feel very passionate about it.
April, I would say the same thing about your business and what you're doing, because isn't it much easier when you actually believe and you really believe in something and
1,000%.
you want to provide an avenue and a format for it.
1,000%.
It kind of more easily. Yeah.
Yeah. And the challenges aren't that big of a deal. You think, okay, I don't know how, I mean, recently this happened 4 days ago. 5 days ago, maybe. I'm sitting in front of my computer and I said, okay, today's the day. I don't know how to syndicate this thing. I have edited episodes. I have show notes pages that are not live and launched yet. And I have to figure out today how to syndicate these stinking episodes because people have to hear what these women have said. They have to hear it. And I feel so strongly about that. And it's crazy what happens and what you can stinking figure out how to do when you feel so passionate.
Exactly. And then these things that you're looking at on the screen and you're looking at these instructions, like, what does this even mean? You eventually figure it out. And it just takes piece by piece by piece and you're dedicated to it and it happens.
Yep.
And
yes.
That's pretty much what building a business is.
Totally.
And piece by piece.
That flexibility too. I remember I put out a post that said, Women Inspired, it's launching on December 5th. And then December 5th came and I'm like, iTunes, approve my stinking podcast. What are you doing? So, okay, fine. Just kidding. It's December 7th. Whatever.
Exactly.
That's our official launch.
Happening later.
Yeah, whatever. So, looking ahead, what's your next goal?
My next goal is really getting more volume out there. So really marketing. I have a stock now. We're developing 2 more styles. So we'll be able to add that to 3 more styles actually, to our assortment, and just continuing to get out there, pounding the pavement and figuring out efficient ways to grow the company in our small, way thus far. I mean, and I will say I'm also really involved in while I'm running the company, I'm also involved in locally breastfeeding rights legislation and parental leave legislation. I feel passionate about that. So we'll just continue pushing forward and take what happened last month under the chin and keep going.
Well, the work you're doing is crazy important. And I think every, and I'm going to say family who's ever gone through, bringing a new little one into the fold understands how important this is. And this is, people look at it as, a woman's issue. This is like a people issue.
Yes.
It is a people issue. It's a family issue. I have a friend of mine from high school. He and his husband actually adopted a child, and it was so difficult because they are fathers. So there wasn't a birth. There's no leave for either of them. And they took 2 weeks of vacation and had to figure out how to drop that new little nugget off with someone when it's 2 weeks old. And it's heartbreaking. So the work you're doing is so incredibly important.
It's a family thing. It's a people, because the bottom line is, even if people don't have children, we have a workforce here. And if it's just down to economics, we have to have a workforce. And that's not going to happen if people are discouraged from having children. And that's the bottom line. So outside of the fact that having a family is amazing, and outside of all the real, human things, just economically, it doesn't make sense not to support this either.
Yeah.
Whether or not you have children. You live in a society. We are all working together. Whether or not you believe that's true, it's true. So it's really important.
That's awesome.
So
if you had to, give advice to other women based on what you've learned throughout your career, throughout this challenge, just, sort of putting it all together, what advice would you have for other women?
I would say trust yourself. That's the biggest thing. We get advice. I mean, I remember as a new mom, I read and we consume all of this information, and it's opposing information. What do we listen to, and this kind of thing? You have a gut that will tell you what is right for you, and what's right for someone else may or may not be right for you. And just be open. Trust your gut and be open. Be flexible. Those are really easy things for me to say. It's really incredibly hard to do. Mm-hmm. But it changes your experience, not only as a mother, but as a person.
Totally. And something that is very salient to me today, as the podcast is officially launching and going live. So this is sort of weird because I'm coming to you from the future, because your episode will air, well after this. But I think being able to trust yourself, it is very difficult. And one thing that has helped me so much is when you do have an accomplishment, like launching this business or having this podcast go live, take a second to be intentional about thinking about the fact that you did achieve it. It's so easy to just hit a goal, move on to the next thing, and not take a minute to say, holy cow, I did this. I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's so important.
That's a really great point. We don't do that. And because we're just, accomplishing so much every day, just women in general, and certainly moms too, but we just accomplish, and we keep going and we keep going. But you're right. We have to pause for a second and just say, wow, I can do this. Mm-hmm. I did it. Mm-hmm. And be celebratory for a moment. Just be grateful, I guess, to ourselves.
Totally.
To our support system.
Absolutely. So I have one last question for you before we wrap up today. I ask every single person that I interview the same exact last question. And as part of this podcast, I'm putting together a Spotify Power playlist. So this is a playlist of songs that women can go to so that they can stay inspired throughout the week and have something to help pump them up. So I would like to add your contribution to the playlist. So I need to ask you for your favorite motivational song.
So I listen to probably at least 3 or 4 times a week a song called Keep Your Head Up. Nice. And it's by a local group called Six Appeal.
Okay.
And it's a group of 6 guys. They're a cappella band, but I'll send it to you.
That's
and it's
awesome.
It just has a great beat. It's just like, things are going to happen, and keep moving. You'll be all right. And I need to hear that.
I think we all do.
Yeah. It's just a really, it's a fun beat too. My daughter loves it. When I drive her in to school, we listen to it and we kind of bop around. So
that's awesome. Yeah. And I hope I can find them on Spotify. Typically I can find everybody on there, but if I can't, if just in this case, since they're a local band, if I can't find them on there, I will definitely link to it on your show notes page so that we can make sure that everybody can listen to your song.
Oh, good.
I cannot thank you enough for coming on, for sharing your story, for sharing your journey with us, the things that you've learned. You can find more information about Heather's collection at nourishcollection.com. I'll have links to all of her social media, her wonderful social media, on her show notes page, and you can find more about her there. So thank you so much, Heather.
Thanks, April. It's been such a pleasure.
Is she a powerhouse or what? Thank you so much for tuning in for this interview with the amazing Heather Shore of Nourish Collection. So, update. I was able to find Heather's song on Spotify, and it has officially been added to our Spotify Power playlist. You can get access to this playlist by visiting www.aprilseifert.com and signing up for our community. On that note, my website has changed. Originally, I envisioned that this podcast would be something that would be career-focused, but it's actually turning into something that's much bigger than that. So, to maintain flexibility, I've migrated over to my own domain, www.aprilseifert.com. Now, I'll warn you, it's bare bones right now, but I'll be building it out over time. I'm so excited to see what this podcast and community is becoming, and I have to thank you all for being a part of it. Until next time, have an inspiring week.